Emotional maturity is when you stop trying to prove people wrong and start choosing peace over noise. There's something powerful about not reacting the way people expect you to. When they push your buttons, throw shade, or test your limits, and you respond with calm instead of chaos, they don't know what to do with that. And if you've done this, you're not just mature, you're a Sigma male. You don't need loud comebacks or dramatic exits to make a point. You've mastered the art of restraint, not because you're weak, but because your energy is sacred. While others fight to be seen or heard, you stay grounded in your values and move in silence. That quiet confidence, it's what shakes people the most. They expected drama, they expected ego, but you gave them clarity, boundaries, and self-respect. That kind of maturity isn't common, and it's the clearest sign that you've outgrown their games. So if they're freaking out over how calm, respectful, and unbothered you were, let them. You didn't just handle the situation like a man, you handled it like a Sigma. Self-led, emotionally bulletproof, and above all, free. Stay that way. You don't owe anyone chaos just because they're addicted to it. Let's get started. Number one, you showed them what grown peace looks like, not the kind of peace that's just for show. Not the "I'm fine" you say with a clenched jaw or forced smile. No, this was different. This was real, solid, unshakable peace that didn't need to be announced, it just was. And that right there is what made them freak out, because when people are used to drama, your stillness feels like an earthquake. You didn't just pretend to be okay, you actually were. You didn't lash out, you didn't try to one-up anyone, and you didn't go on a mission to prove your worth. You just stood there in full control of your emotions and let your maturity speak for itself. That's rare, that's Sigma-level strength. You see, most people never grow out of that teenage mindset where every disagreement has to turn into a fight, every insult needs a comeback, and every boundary you set is taken as an attack. But not you. You outgrew that. You realize that true peace isn't about being passive, it's about knowing when to engage and when to let things go. And when you let go, not because you gave up, but because you chose yourself, that's when they started to panic. Why? Because you didn't give them what they wanted. They wanted to see you flinch, lose control, prove their point. But instead you showed emotional mastery. And when someone with unresolved chaos inside them sees that kind of peace, it hits them hard because it exposes everything they still haven't dealt with. You've reached a level where protecting your inner world matters more than winning. You've learned that not everything deserves a reaction, and not everyone deserves a seat at your table. That kind of peace doesn't come overnight. It's earned through pain, reflection, and choosing growth over ego. So yes, they're freaking out because you didn't explode. You evolved, and evolution, my friend, is terrifying to the ones still stuck in survival mode. Number two, you made it clear you don't need them. No drama, no long emotional speeches, no "please don't leave" texts. You didn't beg, you didn't chase, and you didn't try to force anyone to see your worth. You just left, quietly, calmly, like someone who knew exactly who they were and where they were going. And that shook them to their core. See, people are used to power struggles. They expect tension, back and forth arguments, tears, and desperate attempts to hold things together. But you didn't play that game. You chose dignity, you chose peace, and most of all, you chose yourself. You made it crystal clear you're not here to convince anyone to stay. You're not here to shrink yourself for someone else's comfort. And you're definitely not here to prove your value to someone who can't recognize it. That kind of confidence, it hits different, especially when it comes without anger, just calm, quiet certainty. You walked away without slamming the door, but the message was loud and clear. I'm good, I'll be even better without this. And now they're sitting with that silence, wondering why you didn't fight for them, wondering why you were able to detach so smoothly. What they don't realize is you already fought. You fought for the relationship, for the respect, for the mutual effort. And when it became clear it wasn't being returned, you simply stopped fighting. You know your worth. You know that love shouldn't have to be begged for. And once you saw the imbalance, you made the hardest, most mature move anyone can make. You let go with grace. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you evolved. They thought you needed them to feel whole, to feel grounded. But you showed them otherwise. You showed them that your peace, your strength, and your future don't depend on their presence. And now, they're the ones feeling lost because you walked away without losing yourself. Number three, you handled them like a grown man and left them to deal with their inner child. They came at you with the same old tricks, emotional outbursts, blame games, guilt trips, maybe even the silent treatment, expecting you to snap, chase, or at least match their energy. But you didn't. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't stoop to their level, and you didn't try to win the argument. You just handled it like a grown man, calm, clear, and completely done with the nonsense. That's what really got to them. You didn't retaliate or play emotional chess. You didn't try to fix them or argue your side to exhaustion. You saw the pattern, recognized it for what it was, immature behavior, and refused to feed into it. That's not cold, that's emotional maturity. And for someone who's still stuck in their emotional childhood, that maturity feels like abandonment. They expected you to react like a wounded boy, shouting, chasing, trying to prove yourself, but instead you stayed grounded. You set a boundary and kept it. You walked away without needing to burn everything down. That's rare, that's grown. And now they're left sitting in the silence you left behind, forced to face themselves without a scapegoat. See, when someone acts from emotional immaturity, they need chaos to feel powerful. They push buttons just to see if they can still control the mood. But when their chaos doesn't move you, when you stay cool, detached, and respectful, it flips the power dynamic completely. Now they're not the one in control, you are. Not because you said more, but because you needed less, and that's the real shock to their system. You didn't punish them, you didn't attack them, you just stopped engaging. That kind of emotional restraint is a language only grown men speak, and only the self-aware can understand. So let them wrestle with their inner child. You've outgrown that phase. You're walking in a different league now, and they know it. Number 4, you didn't take their bait. You broke the cycle. They were counting on you to react, to blow up, to defend yourself, to dive headfirst into another pointless argument so they could feel in control again. That's the game. They poke, prod, twist your words and push your buttons just to see if you'll snap. But this time, you didn't. You stayed calm, composed, unmoved. And that shook them more than any reaction ever could. Because when someone thrives on conflict, silence feels like punishment. They expect tension, they feed off emotional back and forth. But instead of matching their chaos, you held your ground. You didn't yell, you didn't explain yourself 100 times, and you didn't fall into their carefully set trap. You just didn't play. That's when everything changed. In that moment, you broke the cycle. The toxic loop that always ends in stress, regret, and drained energy, you cut it off. Not with force, but with quiet power. You gave them nothing to feed on, and now they're left sitting in the mess they tried to pull you into, without you there to clean it up or carry the weight. They're used to controlling the mood, flipping the script to make you the villain or the unstable one. But when their chaos didn't pull you in, it turned the spotlight back on them, and suddenly they had to sit with their behavior. No distractions, no scapegoat, just them, and the silence you left behind. That's silence, that's maturity, that's evolution, that's sigma energy, because it's not about being passive, it's about being powerful in your restraint, about knowing you've healed too much to go backwards, about recognizing that not every fight deserves your presence and not every person deserves access to your peace. You didn't just avoid drama, you changed the whole pattern. And now they're left rattled, wondering how they lost control so fast. But the truth is, they never had it. You had it the whole time. Number 5, you didn't need closure, you became it. You didn't send a long message asking why. You didn't sit there waiting for an apology or some grand explanation. You didn't chase clarity, because deep down you already had it. You knew what you saw. You felt the shift. You understood that begging for closure from someone who didn't respect you would only reopen wounds. So instead you did what most people can't. You gave yourself the ending. And that hit harder than any words ever could. You walked away with quiet finality. No big goodbye, no emotional meltdown, just calm detachment that said, I'm done. Not because you didn't care, but because you finally cared more about your peace than their excuses. And now, they're left sitting in that silence you left behind, wondering how you walked out so calm, so collected, so complete. That's what most people don't understand. Real closure isn't about what they say to you, it's about what you say to yourself. It's the moment you decide to stop needing their version of the story. It's when you realize your self-respect is louder than their confusion. And when you made that choice, you didn't just close the chapter. You became the period at the end of the sentence. You didn't spiral, you didn't collapse into bitterness or rage. You just moved on like someone who finally saw the situation for what it was. And trust me, that shook them. Because people who play games expect a reaction. They expect you to beg for clarity, to fall apart, to make them feel important one last time. But you didn't feed that ego, you walked. Sigma males don't go looking for closure, they embody it. You chose to be the grown man in a room full of unfinished people, and that power, it's unforgettable. It's the kind of silence that echoes long after you're gone. Number 6, you didn't turn it into a performance. No cryptic posts, no shady captions, no dragging people into it with, "Can you believe what they did?" You didn't turn your pain into a public show. You didn't air out dirty laundry for sympathy or spin a narrative to make yourself look better. You simply stepped back, kept it real, and moved on, quietly, respectfully. And that right there, that shook them more than any meltdown ever could. Because people are used to drama. They're used to being the star of someone's emotional movie, playing the villain or the misunderstood victim, whatever gets them attention. But you didn't give them that spotlight. You didn't invite an audience. You didn't perform. You healed in private, processed in silence, and let your peace speak for itself. That kind of emotional discipline is rare. It's powerful. And it's deeply uncomfortable for those who thrive on chaos. Because they can't control the story. They can't twist your reaction into another chapter of the game. You gave them nothing to work with. No scenes, no quotes, just calm distance and unbothered energy. See, you didn't need to prove anything. You weren't interested in playing the victim or the hero. You didn't manipulate the narrative. You just lived your truth. That's the real flex. It shows you've outgrown the need for validation. You don't need a crowd to clap for your pain. You just need your peace, and you kept it intact. Sigma males move differently. You're not out here trying to win the breakup or collect sympathy points. You're focused on growth, not revenge. And that terrifies people who expected fireworks. They don't know how to handle someone who's not looking for attention, just resolution. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was control. Your maturity wasn't fake, it was earned. And now they're stuck with the realization that while they were busy trying to create a scene, you were already halfway out the door without ever slamming it. Number 7, you let them keep the last word, but you took the last power move. They thought they won when they got the last word in, that final jab, that petty comment, that little insult disguised as a truth bomb. They thought it gave them the upper hand, but you didn't flinch, you didn't argue, you didn't even respond. You just looked at the mess they created and walked away. And that silence, that stung way more than any comeback ever could, because here's the truth, the last word doesn't mean anything if it doesn't change the outcome. And you already made your move. You removed yourself, calmly, completely, without noise or drama. That was the real win. You didn't need to fire back because you'd already outgrown the entire situation. When someone throws one last jab, they're looking for validation. They're hoping you'll react so they can feel powerful again. But when you respond with silence, you starve that need. You make it clear without saying a single word that they're not worth your time, energy, or peace. And that's where the power shift happens. Letting them keep the last word is what most people can't do. Their ego jumps in. Their pride wants to clap back. But you stayed in control. You didn't let your emotions hijack your response. That level of restraint is rare. It's surgical. It shows you're not ruled by impulse. You're ruled by purpose. You made it obvious that you're not in the business of pointless back and forths. You're not there to entertain someone's need for chaos. You let them have the mic, but you kept your dignity. And that left them stunned because they were prepared for a fight. Instead, they got silence. Pure, powerful, unbothered silence. That's what Sigma males do. They don't react to noise. They make quiet moves that echo long after they're gone. You didn't just walk away. You ended it on your terms, and that was the loudest move of all. Number 8, you rebuilt without broadcasting the blueprint. You didn't make a show out of your comeback. No dramatic captions, no watch me rise posts, no cryptic updates to make them wonder. You just vanished quietly. No noise, no warnings, and did the work, real work, the kind that requires solitude, discipline, and facing your own reflection without distractions. You didn't need validation, attention, or applause. You just needed peace. And you found it. While they were waiting for you to react, to prove something, to let them know they still mattered, you were somewhere sharpening your mind, getting your priorities straight, and rebuilding yourself from the inside out. They thought your silence was weakness. What they didn't know is it was preparation, because you weren't healing to post about it. You weren't improving to impress them. You were evolving for you. No blueprint shared, no updates given. You understood that real growth doesn't need to be loud. In fact, it's better when it's quiet, because that's when it's real. That's when it's not about showing the world, but about showing yourself who you can be without the noise. And when you came back, you didn't come back with drama. You came back with composure, with presence, with energy that said, I'm not who I was, and I don't owe you an explanation. That shook them, because they expected you to either crumble or come back needing to prove something. You did neither. You let your progress speak for itself. And it did. See, Sigma males don't parade their transformation, they just live it. You became the kind of man who doesn't have to say a word for people to feel the difference. And that's why it hit so hard, because you didn't just rebuild. You upgraded, privately, powerfully, permanently. And now, you don't just look unbothered. You are unbothered. Because you didn't rebuild to be seen, you rebuilt to be solid. Number 9. You killed their narrative with your peace. They had a whole story ready about you. That you were angry, that you were unstable, that you were bitter and couldn't handle the truth. They needed people to see you that way so they could feel like the victim, so they could keep their hands clean while making a mess. But here's the part they didn't expect. You didn't fight back. You didn't post rants. You didn't gossip. You didn't chase people down to tell your side. Instead, you got quiet, peaceful, composed. You let the storm pass without stepping into it. And that silence, that calm energy, it ruined the story they tried to sell, because how can you call someone bitter when they're clearly at peace? How can you paint someone as unstable when they're moving through life with discipline and purpose? You didn't just ignore the lies, they collapsed on their own because your actions no longer matched their narrative. That's the Sigma male effect. You don't try to convince people of your truth, you live it. You let your life speak louder than your words. While they were hoping you'd react and feed the drama, you were outgrowing it. While they were still stuck in petty games, you were too focused on becoming better to care. They're stuck now. Trapped in a story that no longer holds up, because the truth always reveals itself when it's backed by calm. And nothing is louder than a man who doesn't need revenge, validation, or drama to prove who he is. You didn't kill their narrative with anger, you killed it with consistency, with maturity, with peace that couldn't be faked because it was earned. And now they're left confused, embarrassed. Because the version of you they described, it doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it never did. And that truth is burning hotter than any comeback ever could. Number 10. You didn't overshare, you let mystery do the talking. While they were busy spilling everything, talking in circles, defending themselves to anyone who'd listen, making sure the world heard their version, you said almost nothing. No long posts, no angry texts, no emotional speeches trying to prove your innocence. You just stayed composed, and that's what got under their skin. See, most people rush to explain themselves when things go south. They panic, overshare, try to control the narrative, but not you. You understood something powerful. Less is more. You didn't let them bait you into a public show. You didn't feel the need to tell your side to anyone who wasn't wise enough to figure it out for themselves. Instead, you moved like water, calm, controlled, and untraceable. That's the thing about Sigma males. Their silence doesn't mean weakness. It means they've already decided who deserves access and who doesn't. And you? You closed the door without slamming it. That self-control, that quiet dignity, it stuck with them in a way yelling never could. Because when someone expects you to blow up and you don't, when they expect chaos but you deliver calm, they start to wonder. They start to overthink. And that is where your power lives. They're still replaying everything, trying to decode your silence, trying to understand why you didn't need to overshare. And while they obsess, you move forward, peacefully, quietly, without permission. The truth is, mystery is a weapon. It makes people uncomfortable when they can't predict you. It makes them second-guess their assumptions. And you used it without even trying, just by not reacting. That's the Sigma signature. Doing less but saying more. Letting your silence echo in rooms they thought they'd owned. And that echo, it's loud. Because when you refuse to overshare, you don't just protect your peace, you haunt their perception. Number 11. You took accountability where they never expected you to. Here's what threw them off. You owned your mistakes. You didn't deflect, blame, or sugarcoat it. You looked at yourself, saw where you could have done better, and said it out loud. No excuses, no performance, just raw truth. And that shook them, because most people only apologize to manipulate. They say sorry to get something in return, to be forgiven, to be pitied, or to keep the connection alive. But your accountability wasn't for show. You didn't take responsibility to win them back. You did it because you actually care about growth more than your ego. That kind of maturity is foreign to people who are stuck in denial. When you say, yeah, I messed up there, without flinching, it forces them to see their own reflection, and not everyone is ready for that. Insecure people rely on blame. They survive by convincing themselves it's always someone else's fault. So when you calmly take ownership of your role, it ruins that narrative. It puts the spotlight on them without even pointing a finger. You made it clear, you're not afraid of the truth. You're not afraid of your flaws, and that scares people who are still lying to themselves. Sigma males don't need to be perfect, they just need to be honest. And that honesty is powerful. It says, I know who I am and I'm not afraid to face it. That's real confidence, not the loud, arrogant kind, the quiet, grounded kind that doesn't need defending. You didn't take accountability to make peace with them, you did it to make peace with yourself. That's the difference. That's why you grow, while others stay stuck. And now they don't know what to do with someone who doesn't play the victim, doesn't seek pity, and doesn't run from the mirror. Because the moment you owned your part without shame, you did something they never could. You showed what real power looks like. And you didn't need applause, you just needed truth. In final words, here's the truth and let it sink in. They didn't expect you to rise above. They expected drama, desperation, maybe even some emotional wreckage. But what they got instead was a man who stayed grounded, owned his truth, and walked away without a need to be loud about it. That silence, that calm confidence, that's what's messing with them now. You didn't handle them like someone looking for revenge. You handled them like someone who's done the inner work, someone who's too focused on his own growth to be dragged back into emotional chaos. That's the mark of a Sigma male, not just your independence, but your discipline, your ability to act with emotional control when others spiral, your ability to choose peace over power games and growth over temporary satisfaction. People are freaking out because they can't shake you. You didn't give them the chaos they needed to justify their actions. Instead, you gave them clarity. You exposed everything without saying much at all, and the more they try to make sense of your calm, the more they realize you've outgrown them. So if you're still wondering whether you handled it right, you did. You didn't just walk away, you evolved, and now they're stuck watching a man they no longer have access to become everything they underestimated. Stay on that path. Stay sharp. Keep building without explaining. Keep healing without performing, because the more unshakable you become, the more people will have no choice but to sit with the truth you never had to shout. This isn't just how Sigma males move, it's how leaders move. Quiet, solid, unbothered. And if anyone's still trying to figure out why they can't get to you anymore, let them. You're already long gone. Thank you for watching. God bless you.